much. I hope you can. I have to still share my.
Yes. We see your screen. The first slide.
So yeah, so that's the member state level perspective, and you can see there's room for improvement on the EU level compared even to many other countries in the world. And there's a reference framework that is available for member states that really spells out which activities they could consider as climate finance aligned. And yeah, these systems provide a very good incentive to kind of mainstream climate from a public sector investment perspective, which obviously sends signals also. More transparency means that more attention is put towards it, and that will also facilitate kind of mobilizing the private investments, which actually will make up the bulk of investments that are needed for climate change. And that brings me kind of to the second actor that I'm looking at right now. And we have also heard about it in the previous intervention, that there's certainly a global trend towards climate disclosures now. And I like the chart here on the proliferation of the task force on climate-related financial disclosures that has really gained traction over the last years. If you look at the figures from 2018 to 2021, so more and more companies are looking at climate risks and trying to disclose more. And state regulation is also very much going into that direction, and the EU's sustainable finance agenda is really gaining full speed with a lot of regulations. And yeah, my key point here is that a lot of investments are required in all areas, and companies will have to navigate the complexity of this emerging regulation and the new demands. And that is a very challenging task. And yeah, to make the point about complexity, one of my favorite slides over the last months was an overview of what is going to be at stake, so to say, in the next couple of years in terms of implementation of various non-financial disclosures for companies. So yeah, within the EU, there will have to be a rethink, and that also for companies, and that points towards the kind of education of business key point that we had in the previous intervention. All companies will have to learn about their impacts on the environment. So the key word here is double materiality. So the impact of the companies on the environment, as well as the impact, the risks that climate change can pose for companies. And so having these two perspectives is very crucial, and currently it will be very complex to set up and implement all the new requirements, but it's a step in the right direction and will afford a lot of work for all players involved. So smaller and larger companies, as well as the governments, the public sector, to kind of guide and help the private sector in this transition. And yeah, from my role as a Sherpa on this platform on sustainable finance, we have had a lot of experience thinking about the taxonomy. It's a huge thing, the green taxonomy, defining which activities are, so to say, green or are really sustainable. That has been a huge undertaking, but it's clear that actually only defining and investing in what is currently at the moment green, so already beneficial for the climate, will not be enough to actually make the transition. You can see that from the figures. It's called taxonomy alignment. If you do an activity that is green according to the taxonomy, and this is well below 10% in most of the investment portfolios. So it's all about the unknown non-green, and we have to make sure to finance that in order to transition them into more sustainable activities. And for that, we need to know also what is harmful, what is red, and what needs to be phased out, and where we can actually usefully promote investments to transition activities that, for example, right now, most industrial activities would be somewhere in a gray zone, where you don't know whether they're actually harmful or whether they are able to transition to greener technologies, and they need a lot of investments for that. And the first point is to actually know what it is. Therefore, the platform has also recently published a report called the Extended Environmental Transition Taxonomy, thinking about how you could come from a binary green taxonomy towards a taxonomy that says what is harmful, what are the amber categories, the categories with intermediate performance, in order to finance all those transition investments needed towards green. So these are some perspectives, and I guess general guidelines for me are, as all the panelists before me have said, we need speed, and low-hanging fruits, renewables, as well as the infrastructure for electricity, energy efficiency, as well as transport. And we can reconfigure how member states and the EU spends its money. Green budgeting practices are out there, and we can use them. And for the private sector and the disclosures, it's key to enhance the climate mainstreaming, and we need to make sure that we can navigate this complexity. So we have to educate businesses what their activities are actually doing, from the double materiality perspective, their impacts on the environment, as well as the impacts of climate change on their business models. Because for businesses to strive in the future, it is critical to know what climate change, how climate change will impact them, and that's the physical risk, but that's the transitional risks as well. So how policy changes will impact their business models. So that's kind of the financial risks, so to say, or also the judicial risks of potential law cases against some actors. And we have seen that in the past, mainly for big oil majors, for example. And a personal outlook is that the underappreciated challenges, they probably are in climate resilience and adaptation, even in the EU. We have seen that over the last years with many natural catastrophes that impacted not only the regions that are traditionally impacted, but for example, in Germany and the Benelux states, we had huge floodings. These are new impacts that everyone will have to adapt. And obviously, the industrial sector, there's a lot of how-to-abate industries, and we need to find models to help them transition. And that brings me to another point that's dear to me, kind of rethinking what is a just transition. So starting from a conceptual basis and thinking that suddenly climate finance, when you think of just transition, does not stay to the activities that are traditionally considered green, but we look at social care provision, basic services provision, but also other types of investment into education and economic diversification that are actually part of just transitions. So rethinking such a concept would be very beneficial to find new investments and also financing models that make it attractive for private sector companies and the financial sector to invest in. And one aspect of that would also for me to think about how to tie investors into, so to say, just transition clauses. So the need, if you take over a business, that you think about the transitional aspects of the sector and what and maybe even to make it kind of to make it a precondition to have a just transition plan in place. So especially for heavy industries or the energy sector, that would be very important also to deal with the current phenomenon where private investment entities take over some corporates in sectors which are heavily endangered of becoming stranded assets. And the last point is more that geopolitics and climate change are intertwined, and for the EU that means that it will be an important quest to maintain coordination over several decades to make the step towards net zero within a very dynamic world order where a lot is changing at the moment. So that's a huge political task, but also all of our societies are or should be engaged in that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for this perspective, Leonard. So we are a little bit out of time. So let me just give the voice to Wendell. Wendell, can you unmute yourself and present yourself a little bit, and let's just start the panel discussion. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcin. So I'm Wendell Trio. I have a long history of working with the NGO community, both in Greenpeace as well as in Climate Action Network Europe, which is the umbrella organization of NGOs working on climate change. So that's my introduction to myself. Maybe just a few words about the presentations. I think, I mean, all of these three presentations have been extremely great, and I think I also saw that pass by in the chat. I didn't have time to look at all the messages in the chat, but it's very clear that we know what's going to come. I mean, the science is clear about the urgency to act and the huge impacts that climate change will have on many issues in life, as Miguel kind of reminded us. We know that the technology exists actually to make the change. I mean, renewables, energy savings, etc., etc. I mean, it's all available. We know that the money is there, as Leonard also indicated. There's lots of money around. It just needs to be invested in the right things. And we know that taking action will bring co-benefits on many different fields, healthcare, etc., etc. And still, we're not acting fast enough. And so, I think the crucial question is really, how can we bring governments, businesses, citizens to really make the brave decisions they need to do to kind of make the change in a long-term perspective that will put us on a pathway that really will help us to avoid dangerous climate change, keep temperature rise below 1.5, etc., etc. So for me, I mean, of course, there's an issue of education, etc., but it's less about knowledge, but really about, can we make those changes? Can we take the decisions needed? And can we do the things we need to do?
But do you think the war in Ukraine will help us with this? Do you think it's a key time for those decisions?
Well, I think the war in Ukraine is obviously an extremely terrible event, and we need to do everything we can to stop the fighting as soon as possible. But I think the war in Ukraine, in a way, also reminds us of things that, again, we have known and said for quite a while, which is that we need to do this energy transition as fast as possible, and we need to get rid of fossil fuels. not only fossil fuels from Russia, but from other places in the world, as there's lots of fossil fuels coming from countries and regions that have shaky reputations. And if the war in Ukraine can help us to indeed speed up the development of renewable energy, speed up tackling energy waste, which is still occurring everywhere in our society, then yes, this war might be a way to help us in fastening the transition that is needed.
So maybe Mirosław, from the Polish perspective, I'm also Polish, so we see it very clear, basically, and also all the energy and heating system in Poland is very related with on gas and coal. What do you think? If it's a opportunity? I'm talking about the Ukraine crisis. It's an opportunity or it's a risk? Do you have some thoughts about this?
Yeah, thank you. I'm reluctant to say that war is an opportunity. War is a tragedy, and the genocide scenes that we see that Russia is performing is something terrible and cannot be used as the trigger for any other action than stopping it, first of all. But as Wendell said, I think this is another fact showing us that faster transition to renewables is a necessity, not only from the point of view of the climate change, but also on instability of dependency of the fossil fuels. Today, Poland is maybe not so much dependent on gas. It's especially dependent on coal, imported coal. And we are importing this coal either from very far countries like Australia, or we are importing this from other unstable and non-democratic countries like Venezuela, for instance. So that means that we are supporting maybe other regimes that maybe are too far away in geographical reasons to directly threaten us here, but they will be threatening their society and they will be threatening other societies nearby. So as Wendell said, this is just a proof that we have to go faster. And from Polish, simply Polish position, this is why I was saying about the politicians in the this part of education, because I really don't understand if the politicians, to the political class today, and this is going from right to left, all the parties are saying this, that we need to build the nuclear power plant. Myself, I don't know why. It will, according to government plans, it will cover 6 to 9% of the energy needed in the country. So where is the rest? The rest is renewables, and we should be really concentrating on building the renewables now and fast, and allowing that, because this is the only technology that can be implemented fast. Nuclear will be 20-25 years from today, which probably means that any energy storage technologies will be available and much cheaper. So we have to start doing this now. And a little bit to some comments from the chat. I think that this education is pushing into the school systems, into the universities. In Poland, for instance, we already work with the universities in the big consortium of companies, universities, and NGOs to change the curricula, and not to have, even in Western Europe. My son is studying today in one of the countries in Western Europe, and I can see, and he's studying business. So he has accounting, he has marketing, and also he has sustainable development. So it's a separate subject. It's not part of the economy. It's not part of the accounting. At the very end of the day, the only thing which happens in the world is what you account. If you don't account it, it does not exist. So if we don't account the cost of the environment into the normal business processes, nothing will change. And the business will have an impact on the politicians because they need money to finance the campaigns. So if business understands this, this will trigger the politicians. But the business will change if young people who are leaving the universities will already know it, that this is a part of normal planning, not something special, not a separate subject they have to learn.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I can say, because I'm also running a foundation in Poland, like educational foundation, and we are trying to be focused on the universities and business basically, and we're doing some educational programs about climate change. For example, we're using a game like climate fresque. I hope you heard about this. It's really nice view of climate change, why it's changing, and it's one of tool to educate basically people about climate change. But you are right, Mirosław. We have to implement to every section of education. So it's very important. But what do you think, Miguel? Maybe Miguel, to you about whole this situation now in Europe. Do you think, or maybe you have some ideas, or your office, what will be decisions, the decisions of European Union with all the situation in Ukraine? Do you have some information for us?
Thank you. So maybe the first thing to say is the UNFCCC Secretariat looks at the climate change process, right? The intergovernmental process on climate change only. So from that point of view, the situation in Ukraine, let's say, has no direct impact, so if I can say so. We continue forward with the negotiations and seeking collaboration from every party, which means every national government on action on climate. The conflict in Ukraine is dealt with by UN Secretariat in New York and the relevant agencies under the Secretary General. But from the UNFCCC side, we continue focused on promoting action as much as possible. Now, having said that, of course, the conflict in Ukraine changes the panorama, right? Changes the situation in the sense that on the one hand, it highlights that continued reliance on fossil fuels is more risky than, or riskier than maybe many had considered before. The energy independence has been brought to the fore because of this situation. And then you are adding to the rationale for moving away from fossil fuels, the sustainability rationale. You are now adding the more strategic geopolitical considerations, right? So definitely this will have, or this should have, an impact on countries' decisions towards the future. Hopefully positive, in the sense that, well, it becomes an additional motivation if more was needed. Hopefully there was no need for more motivation, especially not something as bad as this. But it becomes a new reason, a new motivation to move away from fossil fuels. On the other hand, it also increases the urgency on alternatives. Okay, so we understand better than ever that the fossil fuels are not a good idea. So how do we transition away from them faster? And here you have the question. There were some comments in the chat about new technologies, right? The technologies that we need to develop. That is clear that we will need to develop and implement, distribute, like carbon capture, for example, which is still a little bit controversial. Of course, carbon capture needs to be done properly, like everything else that we do, right? Anything that you do can be done rightly or wrongly. So carbon capture or carbon removal technologies, which right now seem unavoidable, we really need to have them as part of the solution. They, of course, need to be done correctly. So how do we develop them? How do we develop the solutions and make them commercially attractive or feasible as soon as possible? So this conflict in Europe has increased the urgency to give an answer to those questions, which I hope in the end will be something positive. Again, completely agree with Miroslav that war has nothing positive about it, but hopefully the consequences, some of the consequences on this side, on this area, will be positive. And I see, if I may, Marcin, the questions
Yes,
on nature-based solutions.
yeah.
Yes, this is the other point, right? Every time that you talk about, we are probably going to need carbon capture and removal technologies. Those who have concerns about them immediately say, but no, let's use nature-based solutions first. And this is my personal opinion, of course, not the climate change secretariat's position, but my personal opinion. We need both. We need both. We need to ensure that the carbon that is stored in nature, in natural areas right now, remains there and is increased as much as possible. We need to protect it, restore it, and grow it, definitely, not only for climate considerations, but so many others. However, it's not going to be enough. It's nature-based solutions per se, and energy efficiency and resource efficiency and everything else that we can think of right now will not be enough. So we also need to work on two fronts, or many fronts actually. Some of those fronts being the development of responsibly implemented new technologies, and making sure that we are restoring nature as much as we can, as fast as we can, as well. So, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I have also a question to Miroslav about the Green Deal. So, how should the Green Deal be changed in connection with the war, do you think?
Well, generally speaking, the strategy put forward in the Green Deal is exactly what we have to do. The one thing that I would change definitely is something that has been done. When was it? In February, I think. Leonard, probably you remember when the taxonomy was agreed. And the taxonomy, so like a list of technologies and solutions that are treated by the European Commission as green or natural or neutral technologies that public funds can be invested. And maybe you can remember that at the last couple of weeks of the discussion about the taxonomy, nuclear and gas were included as clean technologies. Well, gas is definitely not a clean technology. It is a transition technology to help us move out, but we have to be very careful about getting into a trap of temporary solutions staying with us forever. And the Russian aggression has proven that gas should not be in the taxonomy at all. This was just a political play from a country that wanted to, promote one of its export companies, which is in financial troubles, and that's why they built the coalition between the nuclear and gas countries, and countries that wanted those two technologies, and that's why those technologies are included. So this is definitely something that should be excluded immediately. Also, we were as a green NGOs, not only WWF, we were showing this in a Polish recovery plan that was prepared a year ago. That extensive development of the gas network is absolutely a bad decision, and included in the national recovery plan, because it will deepen our dependency on the fossil fuels. So definitely those two should be removed. The rest, the direction, the strategy is correct. Thank you.
Maybe Vandal, do you have something to add to this? If you have any comment to what you heard from us?
Yeah, well, a few remarks. One on what Miroslav just said on the inclusion of gas and nuclear in the taxonomy. Important to note that exactly for both those technologies, Russia is the main source of imports of both gas and uranium into the EU. So it's actually the taxonomy proposal is actually going to increase our dependence on Russia and will make it much more difficult to reduce the dependency on Russia. So there's definitely a contradiction there. Secondly, on the other issue of the nature-based solutions, obviously we need everything we can to make the transition, and that means we need to massively invest, deploy renewable energy, massively invest in energy savings, and massively invest in protecting nature. And clearly, there's a strong link between climate change and biodiversity, because we cannot solve the climate change problems without investing in protection of ecosystems, forests, oceans, etc., etc. And similarly, our ecosystems will not be able to survive if we don't tackle climate change, because the impact of going beyond 1.5 degrees for our ecosystems will be irreversible. So yes, I think it's very clear that when we speak about climate change, we actually also speak about protecting biodiversity. It's an inherent link between the two.
Yeah. Yes, so thank you very much for your time here, for your presentations and your great input. We have Jörg, the chairman of Climate Alliance at UTech. And Jörg, I see you are here, and I hope you have some gift for us.
Yes, I do.
Maybe yes.
I try to share my screen, but that's not the one what I wanted to show. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Perfect. Yes, I do have a gift. You're absolutely right, Marcin. First of all, my name is Jörg. I'm the chair of the Climate Action Commission at UTech and the managing director of GoBlueNow. We're a climate consulting company supporting other companies on their transformation towards a 1.5 degree compatible future. And therefore handing over a tree certificate to each of you, each of the speakers and panelists, is always a special pleasure for me, because obviously trees are related to climate. And therefore, first of all, thank you very much for being here, for your valuable contributions. Some of you have been with us already sometimes, and it's always great to see you again. Thank you very much for your time and your discussion, also very lively discussion. And now I show you the certificates for each of you, which of course I will send out to you then after the webinar. So here is the tree certificate for Miguel Naranjo. Here is the tree certificate for Wendell Trio. Here for Miroslav Propé. And last but not least, the certificate for Leonard Schmidt. So having said that, thank you very much again. I hope to stay in touch with you or get in touch with you with whom I'm not already connected. So it's always great to connect via LinkedIn and to see you again in the very near future. And should any one of you, and that of course includes also the participants of that webinar, is interested in finding out more about EUTech's tree planting program in Africa, or about the services GoBlueNow is offering under the headings of sustainability and climate protection, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to engage into any kind of question to address all of your comments and questions. And having said that, I hand back to you, Marcin, but not without having wished all of you a very happy and peaceful Easter. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Jörg. Thank you very much for this. And yeah, again, thank you to all of the speakers and panelists for your input and time. Thank you for your presentations. I think this topic is it's a hot topic, and I'm very happy we were talking about this. Very important because for us also here in Poland, it's important topic. Basically, it should be for whole Europe. How to climate change should work on an organizational level, like basically after what's happening in Ukraine. So yeah, thank you very much. Happy Easter to everyone. Let's stay in touch. Next webinar will be exactly in 1 month. So stay in touch, and please visit our LinkedIn page to check the topic. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.